Okay, thank you so much. So our final speaker this morning is Angelica LINDEBERG. Angelica is the first chief commercial to get hired at the top Swedish women's hockey league. In under 2 years' time, she's run the league on her own and has been a big part of the journey that Swedish women's hockey has made at league level and the positioning they have established. Angelica is going to explore the always interesting topic of competition with a talk titled How a Structured Championship System Can Help with Player Development. I am a great believer that when done well, competition can be highly developmental, and can't wait to hear all about it from Angelica. So please welcome Angelica. Thank you. Thank you.
So, hello everybody. It's always fun to have the last shift before lunch, but hopefully you will be awake this 40 minutes before lunch break. So I got the question from Blanca, who runs the women's program in the IHF, if I could come here and have this topic and talk about that, as well as how a well-league structure can be beneficial for player development as well as the national team. So before jumping into that, I will start watching a video to come in the mood for women's hockey. Yeah, so that was some clips from the last season in SDHL, as well as some clips from the tournament that is that the Swedish Federation is arranging. So before I'm jumping into the presentation, I think it's always nice to have some kind of presentation of who I am. So I always tend to get the question, oh, have you played hockey? And no, I haven't played hockey. I'm one of those who's always been watching hockey, thinking it's fun to watch hockey. But until 2016, I have never came across that women could play hockey. And how did I came across that? I went to the university and studied a course, Hockey Culture and Society. And yes, that's a course in Sweden. That was the first time I came across women's hockey. And I don't know if it's about the visibility, that the women's hockey haven't had that much of visibility, but that was the first time. And knowing that, together with always wanted to work within hockey, I reached out to one of my favorite clubs in Sweden, asking if I could volunteer for their women's team. So I started there, and that was 2016 as well, and then 2 years later, there was still no one working with the league. That was founded 2016. So I reached out to the board, pretty much sold myself in there, and they decided to hire me. I'm also a mother of 2 + 1, I say. I think it's interesting with the +1. I have a dog. I can play the video just to see. His name is Puck, and he always liked to watch the puck. That's kind of interesting. He's always moving his head, looking for the puck. Yeah, so with that in mind, you know a little bit about me. Let's jump into what I'm about to talk about. So the Swedish Women's Hockey League is the top league in Sweden for women to play in. We have a business structure that we are a limited company, meaning the clubs are the owners, and the clubs are, we have 10 participated clubs. We, during one season, play 180 games plus the playoffs. We have 17 nationalities playing in SDHL, so we are a league not only for the Swedes, as well as for the nationalities outside of Sweden. One funny part is that 7% of the population in Sweden watched a decisive game last season. That is pretty good numbers. And with saying that, we are struggling with coming, to connect with the audience to come and watch the games in the arena. But the interest of women's hockey, it is there. Okay, I will take the opportunity just to go into a little bit more about the SDHL, since I'm from SDHL. We have a mission, as many companies, that is that we should develop Swedish Women's Hockey League, but as well as Swedish Women's Hockey, both to develop talent, which is interesting about what Sergio was talking about earlier, as well as raise elite hockey players. And how do we do that? Well, we're coordinating all these kinds of things as resources, the teams, and the committed partners. So we also have a business idea that we should popularize women's hockey. And I went to a Women's Summit a couple of months ago, and we were talking about visibility, how can we get the game growing within hockey, but especially women's hockey. So we want to popularize women's hockey in Sweden, as well as create the best conditions for our associations. And when we're talking about raising the conditions, it's always about the money. To continue, we have a vision. I think that is a very, very important vision. I personally love it since I was one of them who came across to implement it. We want and we're aiming to be Sweden's most healthy league. And what does that mean? Well, it's not about just jumping up in the morning and ask, how do I feel today? We believe that you will have to be well outside the rink as well as inside the rink. So if you're feeling well outside of hockey, you will be able to present on a higher level. But it's also about player safety. We work a lot with player safety, and it will come in a couple of slides, as well as the economic part. We want our clubs to be sustainable and healthy within the economics. Last but not least, we have our core values. And I believe that many companies that have core values always tend to not have them as a central part in their companies. So we in SDHL want every step that we take to reflect in our core values. And it is to be brave, it is to be smart, and it is to be innovative thinking. And I have plenty of cases of how we are that. But since that's not the case here today, I will not go into that. I will have one example in the next slide. Okay, so I had the main angle, how we work and how have a league structure is beneficial for national team and develop players. But to understand that, we need to go through the model that we have in Sweden. So Mike talked yesterday about Minnesota and to be accessible and to have, to be staying and playing where you live, to be local, to be accessible. And that is what we have in Sweden. That is pretty much our model. So from grassroots to elite, we always talk about the Swedish model. But what is the Swedish model? I mean, everyone working within hockey in Sweden, I believe, have heard about the Swedish model and are as well working within the Swedish model. But how to define it, I don't think that many people knows how to do that. So I reached out to one of my colleagues at the Federation, Sarah, that is here today, and asked, how do we define the Swedish model? For this occasion, how should I talk and tell about the Swedish model? So I got this, a model and approach that most development takes place in the associations. So what do we mean with that? Well, 2006, the Swedish national team won a silver medal. The problem with it was when they stopped playing, we didn't have much more after that. And why is that? Well, because we have invested all kinds of resources as well as money in some individuals. We hadn't had the wide and the breadth of the hockey. We only invested and had some money in some individuals. So we switched, or we, the Federation, switched focus from having 80-20 in the national team to 80-20 in the associations when it comes to the daily, to have everyday life in when to play hockey. So I think this picture as well is a good symbol to the Swedish model, since we want every player to start to play in a young age, of course, where they live, where they have maybe a club they are watching the games from. So this is not the case, but about the example that I was referring to on the core values, we had a campaign a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, where the message was that we should have more women players, but we should as well have more women leaders in hockey. And it's like, watch around here, it's not that many women. So we had CCM and Bauer to take, or to make glass helmet to have that message by having more women leaders in hockey, both in boards, to coach, to, yeah, in every step. So I thought that was a good picture just to have with me here today. So we always talk about how can we increase the numbers. And in that Women's Summit, we also talked about how can we grow the game. During the pandemic, we could see that the players on the men's side was like getting lower. On the women's side, it was increasing. And we are talking about how can we increase the numbers. This is some numbers from some years ago as well as now. We have increased, and you should remember that we are not that many in Sweden. So what is it that we do? So we have increased the players. To start with, why is numbers important? We think that that creates a competitive environment. We come from a mentality in Sweden that having players almost think that they own the jersey from the national team. They are so good that they know that they're going to be selected for the national team. And that is not what we want, because we think if we have a competitive environment, they will be motivated to start and to continue to develop. But we also think from a sustainable way that if we don't get a female growing segment, hockey will not compete as a whole in the movement. And then I mean the men's hockey, the women's hockey, the entire movement. So we need to get this segment growing, as well as the numbers. So what is it that we do in Sweden? How is the system connected? The system as a whole. We have a system that goes from when the players are young and starting to play, going up to be an elite player. So we have TKH, that is Tre Kronors Hockeyskola. That is when the players start to play or want to play, or to play hockey. Going from there, they're going to some kind of girls program, not program, but girls team. And this is where we could develop at the most, I would say, in Sweden. We need and we know that when girls play with other girls, they tend to stay in the game. We also have NIU, that is when you go to high school, then you play hockey and also as well as go to school. Now for the upcoming season, we will have, for the first time, junior series. So juniors playing with juniors against juniors. And that we think will be a really important step to develop them as a player. We have NDHL, which is the league under SDHL, and then SDHL you know. And then last but not least, we have the Swedish Ice Hockey Federation as well as the Swedish Olympic Committee. And the Swedish Ice Hockey Federation are having the national team. And the Swedish Olympic Committee, I will come to in a couple of slides to understand and to tell you guys about how our cooperation looks like. So going down to the numbers below, we have 2006, the federation decided to switch focus to 80-20 in the national team, to 80-20 in the clubs. But what happened 2019? Does anyone knows? Except the Swedes? So Sweden got degraded from the A group to the B group. So how can I stand here saying that our model is the best? Well, we believe that it takes time to adapt. It takes time to have some kind of change in the system as a whole. What happened 2019, it was not okay, but we know kind of why it happened. So from then we sat down and okay, what is supposed to happen now? What should we do to be not in the B group, but as well as how can we be more competitive? How can we be more successful in hockey, since that is one of our sport in Sweden? So we sat down and we had this girls' women's initiative. And we most of all, sat down to have goals and to have a strategy, like how can we work from the grassroots to elite? What should every step be in aiming for 26 and 30, and what are we aiming for? Well, we're aiming for the medals in the Olympics. And I don't say this is perfect. We don't know if it's perfect and if it's working, but we believe that this should be our model in Sweden. And I will come to why we think that as well. Okay, so SDHL then. Now you know of the system, you know how everything is connected. What is it that we do and how are we well organized? Well, we have some strategic areas and goals, of course, and they are 6, but I have taken out 2 of them. We have sport. We're aiming to be the most attractive and constant league, both in the sport and economy. And I would say that we are pretty much an attractive league, but I will not say that we are consistent. We have clubs that are really good, as Julio, as you saw in the video, but we have as well clubs that need to do more to develop players as well as grow the game. We want each club to have Swedish national players as well as international top players. We have that, but since this strategy is from now to 27, we want to make sure that it stays like that. We also, as we are here today, want to give coaches the best possibilities and tools to develop themselves, because we believe when coaches develop, they will also be able to develop players. So that is one thing we are having as a main thing for the upcoming season as well. So nationally we have that we want to secure the players' development in the clubs, and that's important of course, since we are responsible for developing players. We also want to develop the cooperation with the federation, of course, and I will come to that as well soon. But in every strategy, we always come down to how do we do this? How do we measure it? How do we know that we are on the right track? So we have some responsibility, of course. We have to make sure that we are offer conditions to our clubs, as well as increasing the development. So we offer, as I mentioned, tools for both coaches and players. As for now, my sport director is negotiating with the sport contract, and as well, the clubs are having video, but they are not as good to use it as on the men's side. So for that part, we will have to have education for them. How can they use video? We also have one important thing, that is the collective agreement. It includes insurance, as well as conditions in event of sick leave. And for the upcoming season, we have a requirement for the clubs that they must have health insurance for the players. Maybe not so important for this case, but we also offer visibility in terms of TV agreement. That's my part of the job. We have both public service and Seymour, that is a streaming side that streamed every game that we have in SDHL. But we need to ensure as well that the clubs develop players day by day. That is the most important thing. Since we have an agreement with the federation that the development should take place in our clubs, then we must ensure that the developing is taking place in the clubs. We also need to ensure that we lead by example, that we take this seriously, that we develop players, but as well as taking the girls' activities for real. We also need to follow up how they conduct with all women's activities. And why we do that is, of course, to ensure quality, sustainability, and more income. So I've talked a lot about how we are I see that we are collaborating with the federation, since we having the players, but then they should come to the national team when it's tournaments. So we have a lot of symbiosis between the federation and the league. I would say it takes place from sustainability as well as long-term strategy. I mean, in Sweden, all the society and also the companies is always measure us in how sustainable we are. And of course, it's about if we take the train or the plane, but it's most about if we work sustainable. Do we work sustainable with the player development? That's one question. and that comes to include instead of exclude. We don't believe in selecting in young age. We believe in having a holistic approach, as it's been a lot of talking about this today, to have hockey for life. You should be able to start to play hockey when you are young, and you have to, we want you to be able to stop playing when you want to stop playing, not because someone says that you're not good enough. So coming to the most interesting part, I think, for this event, player safety developed more physical play in women's hockey, and then I mean in Sweden. So to have the background, we understood, okay, that we have a lot of head concussions in the Women's Hockey League. So how can we have so many head concussions even though we don't have body checks? So by having this information, we started a collaboration with a researcher in Sweden called Mikael Svarén, and he fixed so we can have catapult in one club. And in that way, we could measure the women's hockey team against the juniors. And what do we got? This was the results. So in player load, we had 186 in a game, and then we had 118 in practice. And not the funny part, but something in this is that we had a lot of head concussions during practice. So then also compared to the juniors, they had much better player load. So when we analyzed this, we thought, okay, what can we do to higher the intensity as well as lower the head concussions? So we increased and allowed more physical play. And that might not seem as a good idea since we had a lot of head concussions, but we had a theory. So we allowed in more physical play, and from one season to another season, the head concussions went down. And why is that? Well, we believe but when we allowed in more physical play, the players got more awake. In women's hockey, many players, don't hate me, are looking down at the puck. They don't look up. So when saying that we're going to allow more physical play, they had to teach to lift up the head and be awake of what can happen around them. So that was some years ago now, and last year we as well allowed the body checks in the Swedish women's hockey. I should, with the fact now, we should have communicated that we will allow physical play since body checks are a controversial question within women's hockey. But what happened with the player load? Results after allowing more physical play. So, as you remember, we hadn't not that good numbers, but we got much better player load, and the most interesting part is that we got better player load in the practice than the games. And how could we measure it? How could we know that we are doing the right thing here? Well, we had in January, I think it was, we had the U18 in Östersund, the Swedish team. They went to the final. I've never seen a Swedish team play that good. They had a confidence, and they were ready. They played with confidence in that they were having the high intensity. As well as we had the national team in Canada, in Brampton, in the Women's Worlds. They were the first team to take Canada to an overtime. I don't know if that's to this, but we believe that there's something here to continue to work from. Okay, so the Swedish Olympic Offensive, we also have a collaboration with them to have something concrete with the player development. So we have a 3-year investment from them. And what is that? Well, they're conducting the summer camps like a traditional way, gathering 20-25 younger kids. And the best part of it, I think, is that you are not secured a spot just because you are selected one year. You can't be selected and then think, okay, I'm one of the players in the national team and I'm ready. You have to be motivated to develop every single year. The focus is to develop, get more opportunities together, and also measure and testing. And the goal as well is to aiming for the medals in the Olympics 26 and 30. Yeah, so wrapping this up, We had a player who was in the 2006 team, a former goalie, Kim Martin. She is now a GM for Frölunda, so she has been a part of the system as it was back then and now. And she says, during the time when the clubs were not so structured and did not have the best conditions for us players, the national team meant a lot. To get help with physicals and to get more international matches when the matches at home were not as good. So back then, the clubs didn't manage to have good games. There was no league. There was no structure. How it is now. Today, the conditions have increased enormously at many clubs, and the same amount of international matches is not needed. The clubs have good training, both ice and physical, and the league is really strong. The cooperation between the clubs and the national team works very well. And I think that is vital in our system. We are cooperate between the league and the federation, as well as we understand that we need each other. So to wrap this up, the Swedish model is a starting position now. We believe in the Swedish model. We need to increase the numbers of players. That is key to a better competitive environment. Sustainability is central in everything we do, and it must be in the future as well. Physical play developed, better intensity. That one you can take with you home. And if we don't get a female growing segment, hockey will not compete as a whole in the movement. So I guess I have managed to take and do this in time, so you can eat lunch soon. But thank you for listening, and thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Angelica. Thank you so much for that. That was really good. We have some time for questions, but I've got a first question for you. So my first question relates to your dog. Okay, so your dog, Puck.
Yeah.
Right? Nature or nurture? Is it a boy dog?
He's a boy.
A boy dog,
yeah.
Okay. Was he always like that, or did you train him to follow the puck?
No, he was always like that. But he's been watching hockey from the start in his life. So
he was born into a hockey family, right? Because we have a Yorkshire Terrier, okay, and we sit together to watch the TV, stuff like that, and he always faces the wrong way round. He's never looking at it. So please teach me how to get my dog to look at the right thing. Yeah. But okay, we have some time for questions. So any questions in terms of Angelica's presentation? Yes, Tamra, please. Can we get a microphone over there? Great.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you, you talked about developing players. Are you looking to have overseas players come?
We have. Or you mean to come to another country, or to? Yeah,
let's say I have some Australian players who are interested in going to play in Sweden that are under 18.
Yeah.
Are your clubs looking to provide those kind of pathways?
We have a lot of them coming to Sweden, and that's up to the clubs, I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I can see the beginning of a long-term friendship there, or even commercial relationship. Okay, any other questions for Angelica?
Everybody just wants to go to lunch.
We're not going to let them yet. Angelica, I've got a bit of a question really, but I loved the way you define the values of your organization really, and you talked about being brave, smart, and innovative. So I wonder if there's any, and I know you've given some examples already, but when you think about those three things, brave, smart, and innovative, for example, explain to me a bit more what does it mean to be smart in this context? How does the organization become a smart organization?
Well, we think, we're looking into it in a wider perspective. In a historic way, we always tend to do the same as the men's hockey have done, take the same decisions. And we don't think that's, it's not that easy. We need to be smarter in our decisions when we're heading, forward with the women's hockey. So we need to like sit down and be taking smarter decisions, I would say.
Yeah. So it's not again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. If we do the same thing that we do for the men's hockey, it's not going to work.
No, I believe like we need to take the best parts of it, but I think we need to create some like a different product within women's hockey. It's another consumers, another economy, and it will be for the upcoming years, I would say.
Yeah, and obviously, and I think it's happening all across Europe, but especially in the UK where I live, for example, women's football has experienced a massive growth over the last 4 or 5 years. Is there anything that they're doing in that space that you're looking at to try and replicate in the hockey context, or?
Well, I mean, like in a commercial way, I would say when having bigger countries understanding the value in women's hockey, it will increase. It will happen as in UK. And I think it's a matter of time when it will happen in hockey as well. So we are now a top league in Europe. We're the best in the world. We are one of the best. But I think in upcoming years we will be maybe a developed league since we are a small country. But I think and I hope that that will happen for the women's players as well.
Great, thank you. There we go. We got a question here, please. Can we get a microphone to this gentleman here? Thank you.
I'm not really happy about that you have a body check in Sweden, so I don't know how it will happen if your team is going with the national team to the IHF event and they have no body check, how they can split this situation.
Well, the players have to learn. As long as the rules are different in international, they need to learn, but we can see like the intensity is going higher and it's getting better. So we believe if they can adjust, it will be better for them and it will be beneficial for them to come to the international games. Even though we need to, we can't get the, we need to be able to adjust, that's for sure.
Thank you.
But I don't think it's, I just want to take that, we don't want to say body checks anymore. We want to say more physical play, and I believe that the men's hockey and the women's hockey will meet in the middle in the upcoming years.
Thank you. Any final questions for Angelica? Nope.